When we talk about the rendezvous threat, it comes from dual-use spacecraft capable of rendezvous proximity operations. So for simplicity, from now on, I may call them just R-Spacecraft to represent rendezvous spacecraft. Now, these rendezvous spacecrafts have peaceful uses, of course. They can be used to refuel, repair, upgrade, or transport satellite in space. And of course, they can also remove space debris. The important thing is these spacecraft or their variants can also be used to perform anti-satellite or ASAT purposes. That's why they are dual use. That means that our spacecraft can be used to move our satellites to useless orbit without harming it. But if they are at useless orbit, it's not going to help. And also to ban or disconnect our antennas and solar panels to disable our satellite with little space debris generator. So one thing that we should also note that our spacecraft for ASAT cannot be distinguished from the peaceful counterpart until these ASATs actually make the attack and make physical contact with our satellite. So that means often we don't have timely warning. So the question is, how do we generate timely warning before they make the attack so that we can defend it? So next slide, please. So since 2018, at least a dozen of high-level space officials and agencies, including former Vice President Mike Pence and John Hyten and John Raymond, all these generals, have expressed concern that our spacecraft could threaten our critical satellites from close range. For example, General James Dickinson, he is the commander of U.S. Space Command, testified on April the 20th, 2021, that Beijing, so I'm reading it out loud here, Beijing actively seeks space superiority through space and space attack systems. One notable object is the Xi'an-17, a Chinese satellite with a robotic arm. So space-based robotic arm technology could be used in a future system for grabbing other satellites. So the key point is, if they can grab their own satellite for service, they can certainly grab our satellites for attack. So that's the basic problem of dual-use systems. Next slide, please. Okay, now in January 2022, China's Xi'an-21 successfully docked with the defunct Baidu second navigation satellite at GEO and moved it to an orbit 3,000 kilometers above. So that means that our spacecraft is successfully to do civilian and also at the same time military thing, just the same, because they're the same. Now, this was only 2 years after North Grumman attained the same feat with mission extension vehicle in February 2020. Now, that surprises many, many people in the US. Some, I don't want to name names, but they said, oh, they will never do it. They cannot do it. And then later on, I say, well, how about 5 years? Oh, no, 5 years. So I will talk more about that later. But now it's not 5 years later. It's only 2 years later.
Brian?
Yeah.
It also happened approximately 4 weeks after we finally released the report on a game that we held where we described actions very similar to what the Chinese did in January of 2022. And it was seen as, well, a game. And yeah, well, of unfortunately, it was a little too accurate.
Yeah, that's amazing. But the interesting thing is, we change it, but opinion for many people, they're just the same. They say, yeah, they can do it, but we have never seen them to use the same thing to attack our satellites. Come on. I mean, any person with intelligence certainly will not practice on us to give us warning, So they certainly practice on their own, and then you make the guess. But anyway, I will talk more about that. So next slide, please. Okay. So what's the current approach to counter a rendezvous ASAT? So what does it do? In fact, the way is they just use their trump card. They thought it's silver bullet. So we just proliferate satellites, because currently there are too few, early warning satellites, nuclear communications, there are only too few. So what if we make them more? Okay, I have a lot more to say on this, but I wait until the discussion. But anyway, they use the trump card and say, okay, all we need is to replace them with a large number of satellites and make them very cheap. Okay, now that's very important. But it doesn't mean that there's a silver bullet, you can solve all the problems, because if you listen to so-called, he's the director of National Reconnaissance Office. He said that there will be some number of large satellites, meaning vulnerable satellites, to address questions that only they can, meaning that these large satellites, we have to have them. Okay, well, certainly in the 2020s and certainly well into the 2030s, but by my reckoning, they probably will use for a longer time. Okay. So the bottom line is, I mean, you cannot make the satellite cheap to avoid it. On the other hand, we have so many other ways at our disposal to do it. Why don't we use all of them? Why don't we just use one? Meaning that all we do is we make it so cheap that other people cannot attack our satellites and we can replace it. So that's our problem. Our problem is not that we don't have a good one. We don't use all of them. So that's the problem. Besides, these all other ones are even cheaper.